The strangest journeys often begin with a single wrong turn. Olivia Bennett had always believed that life was meant to be predictable. At 23, she measured her days by the quiet rhythm of turning book pages, greeting familiar customers inside the neighborhood bookstore where she worked, and walking the same streets home every evening beneath rows of maple trees. She had never been drawn to loud places or crowded rooms. While many of her friends chased excitement across the city, Olivia found comfort in old novels, warm coffee, and conversations that never needed to compete with music. Her world was small, peaceful, and carefully arranged, and she had convinced herself that was enough. Then one rainy Friday evening, everything changed. Dark clouds rolled across the Boston skyline just as Olivia finished closing the bookstore. She had forgotten her umbrella that morning, assuming the weather forecast would be right. It was not. Within minutes, rain poured through the streets, soaking sidewalks and sending pedestrians rushing beneath storefront awnings. Olivia laughed quietly at her own bad luck before searching for the nearest place to wait out the storm. A glowing sign across the street caught her attention. Music drifted softly through an open doorway while warm light spilled onto the wet pavement. She hesitated only briefly before stepping inside, hoping for nothing more than a dry place to escape the rain. The room surprised her. Instead of the overwhelming chaos she had imagined, the atmosphere felt elegant and welcoming. Soft lighting reflected across polished wood floors while conversations blended naturally with gentle music. People smiled, talked, and enjoyed the evening without urgency. Olivia found a quiet seat near the back, wrapped both hands around a glass of sparkling water, and allowed herself to breathe. Then the lights shifted. The music changed. A woman stepped onto the stage with calm confidence that immediately drew every eye in the room. Olivia looked up without thinking. The performer moved gracefully beneath the warm lights, every movement carrying quiet self-assurance rather than spectacle. Her chestnut hair shimmered beneath the soft glow, and her expression remained peaceful, almost thoughtful, as though she were telling a story without speaking a single word. Olivia realized she was no longer paying attention to anything else. She did not know the woman's name. She did not know why her heart suddenly felt lighter. She only knew that for the first time in years, the carefully ordered world she had built around herself seemed far too small. Outside, the rain continued falling against the windows, but inside, something entirely unexpected had already begun, carried not by loud words or impossible promises, but by one unforgettable glance that quietly changed the direction of an ordinary life. The next morning, Olivia arrived at the bookstore carrying more questions than books. She smiled at customers, arranged new arrivals on polished wooden shelves, and recommended favorite novels with the same gentle kindness she always had, yet her thoughts wandered back to the woman beneath the warm stage lights. She could still remember the quiet confidence in every movement and the peaceful expression that had seemed strangely out of place inside a busy club. It surprised her how vividly the memory remained. She knew nothing about the performer except the feeling that somehow the evening had become impossible to forget. Throughout the day, rainwater continued dripping from the bookstore awning while gray clouds lingered above Boston. By late afternoon, sunlight finally broke through, filling the streets with fresh reflections that made everything appear newly washed. Olivia decided to stop by a small neighborhood café before heading home. It was the kind of place she loved, filled with worn wooden tables, handwritten menus, and the comforting aroma of fresh coffee and warm pastries. She ordered a vanilla latte, found a quiet table beside the front window, and opened the novel she had been trying unsuccessfully to finish all week. A few minutes later, the bell above the cafe door chimed softly. Olivia glanced up without thinking. Her heartbeat paused for the briefest moment. The woman from the previous evening had just walked inside. There were no stage lights now. No elegant performance. No audience watching her every move. She wore a simple grey sweater, blue jeans, white sneakers, and a light jacket folded over one arm. Her chestnut hair rested naturally on her shoulders, and she carried a canvas tote bag filled with groceries instead of anything glamorous. She looked completely different, yet somehow even more genuine. Olivia quickly lowered her eyes, embarrassed by the sudden rush of nervousness. She told herself there was no reason to stare. Moments later, she noticed the cafe had become unexpectedly crowded. Only one empty chair remained, the one across from her. The woman approached with an apologetic smile. "Would you mind if I sat here? Every other table seems to be taken." Olivia looked up and smiled before she could overthink her answer. "Of course. Please do." The woman thanked her warmly and settled into the chair with quiet ease. For a few peaceful minutes, neither of them spoke. They simply enjoyed the soft music, the comforting smell of coffee, and the gentle rhythm of an ordinary afternoon. Finally, the woman glanced toward the book resting in Olivia's hands and smiled. "That is one of my favorite novels." Olivia laughed softly. "I have been trying to finish it for weeks." The woman smiled again, her eyes warm with quiet amusement. Maybe stories are not meant to be rushed. Olivia found herself smiling back, unaware that the simplest conversation of her life had just become the beginning of something she had never expected to find. Over the next several days, Olivia found herself returning to the little café more often than she ever had before. At first, she convinced herself it was because the coffee was better than anywhere else in the neighborhood. Then she admitted the truth, at least to herself. She quietly hoped to see the woman whose gentle smile had somehow become part of her thoughts. On Thursday afternoon, that hope became reality. Olivia was browsing the small bookshelf near the cafe entrance when she heard a familiar voice greeting the barista by name. She turned and saw the same warm smile from the rainy evening, now illuminated by soft afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. The woman noticed her almost immediately and smiled with genuine recognition. "It seems we have the same favorite cafe," she said. Olivia laughed softly. "It is beginning to look that way." They ordered their drinks together and, without discussing it, chose the same table by the window. This time the silence between them felt comfortable rather than uncertain. They spoke about books first, then music, then the neighborhoods they loved walking through after work. Olivia learned that the woman's name was Sophia Hayes. She discovered that Sophia enjoyed quiet mornings, old bookstores, fresh flowers from local markets, and peaceful places where nobody expected her to perform for anyone. It surprised Olivia how ordinary those answers sounded. She had imagined someone who spent evenings beneath colorful lights would live an entirely different life. Instead, Sophia smiled when describing early morning farmers markets and admitted that rainy Sundays spent reading novels felt like perfect days. Olivia found herself relaxing with every passing minute. Eventually, curiosity gently found its way into the conversation. "Can I ask you something?" she said carefully. Sophia nodded. "Of course." Olivia hesitated before speaking. "The other night, I happened to see you at the club." Sophia looked down for a brief moment before smiling with quiet understanding. "I wondered if you recognized me." There was no embarrassment in her voice, only honesty. "That is where I work," she continued. "It pays the bills, and I enjoy performing because I love music and movement. But it is only one part of who I am." Olivia listened without interrupting. Looking at Sophia sitting across the table with a warm cup of coffee between her hands, she realized how easy it would have been to judge someone by a single moment. Instead, she was discovering a thoughtful, kind woman whose life extended far beyond one brightly lit stage. As late afternoon sunlight painted golden patterns across the wooden floor, Olivia quietly understood that sometimes the most extraordinary people reveal themselves not beneath the brightest lights, but during the calm conversations that happen after the spotlight fades away. As October settled gently over Boston, their unexpected meetings slowly became part of everyday life. Some afternoons began with coffee before Olivia's shift at the bookstore. Other evenings ended with long walks through quiet neighborhoods where rows of brownstone buildings glowed beneath warm streetlights. Nothing about their friendship felt forced. Sophia never filled the silence simply because she thought she should. Olivia never worried that every conversation needed to be interesting. Somehow, ordinary moments became the ones they treasured most. One Saturday morning, Sophia invited Olivia to a neighborhood farmers market she visited every weekend. Fresh flowers, homemade bread, baskets of crisp apples, and the scent of cinnamon drifted through the cool autumn air while local musicians played gentle acoustic songs beneath colorful tents. Olivia watched as vendors greeted Sophia with genuine smiles. She noticed the elderly florist handing her a single white daisy before refusing payment with a cheerful laugh. At the bakery, The owner quietly slipped an extra pastry into Sophia's bag. Everywhere they walked, people seemed genuinely happy to see her. Olivia smiled. "I thought everyone only knew you from the club." Sophia laughed softly and shook her head. "Most people know me from here instead. I have been coming every Saturday for years." They wandered between the market stalls until they found a quiet bench beneath a row of maple trees. Sophia handed Olivia a warm apple cider while watching children laugh nearby as they chased colorful leaves across the grass. "People usually assume they already know everything about me," Sophia said gently. "It used to bother me. Now I just let them believe whatever they want until they decide to ask." Olivia looked down at the cup warming her hands. "I almost made the same mistake." Sophia smiled without judgment. "Almost." They both laughed quietly. The conversation drifted toward childhood memories, favorite family traditions, and dreams they had quietly carried into adulthood. Olivia admitted she had always wanted to open her own independent bookstore one day, a place where people could slow down and lose themselves in stories. Sophia listened with complete attention before saying, "I think you would create a place where people would feel at home." No one had ever described Olivia's dream that way before. The simple sentence stayed with her long after they left the market together. As they walked through streets covered with brilliant autumn leaves, Olivia realized she was no longer fascinated by the woman she had first seen beneath soft stage lights. She was falling quietly for the thoughtful, compassionate person who smiled at strangers, remembered people's names, and somehow made every ordinary day feel filled with unexpected light. As the weeks passed, Olivia began noticing small changes in herself that she could no longer explain away. She caught herself smiling whenever her phone vibrated, secretly hoping another thoughtful message from Sophia would appear on the screen. She found new reasons to leave the bookstore a few minutes early, knowing there was a chance they might meet for coffee before Sophia headed to work. Even ordinary walks through Boston seemed brighter simply because every familiar street now carried memories they had created together. One quiet Tuesday evening, they wandered along the Charles River as the last light of sunset reflected across the calm water. A gentle breeze carried the scent of autumn leaves while runners and cyclists passed by without disturbing the peaceful rhythm of the evening. They stopped on a small overlook where the city skyline shimmered against the darkening sky. Neither of them spoke for several moments. The silence no longer felt uncertain. It felt comfortable, as though they had known each other much longer than only a few weeks. Sophia finally smiled. "You always seem happiest near books or water." Olivia laughed softly. "Maybe they both remind me to slow down." Sophia nodded. "I think that is one of the things I admire most about you. You never make life feel rushed." The words settled gently into Olivia's heart. No one had ever described her quiet nature as something worth admiring. She looked toward the river, unsure how to respond without revealing more than she was ready to admit. That night, after returning to her apartment, Olivia sat beside the window with a cup of tea, watching the lights of passing cars below. Her phone rested on the table beside her. A message from Sophia appeared only a few minutes later. It was a simple photograph of the river they had just left behind with one short sentence beneath it. "I already miss our conversations." Olivia stared at the screen for a long moment before smiling. Her heart felt wonderfully full, yet something else quietly appeared beside that happiness. Fear. She realized she had begun depending on these moments more than she ever intended. The thought unsettled her. Sophia lived in a world Olivia still barely understood, surrounded by people, music, and late nights. Olivia's own life remained peaceful, predictable, and carefully planned. What if their differences eventually became too great to cross? What if she misunderstood everything? Instead of answering immediately, Olivia placed the phone face down and closed her eyes. For the first time since they had met, she wondered whether protecting her heart meant stepping back before it became impossible to imagine life without the woman who had quietly transformed every ordinary day into something she never wanted to end. The days that followed felt strangely quieter than before. Olivia answered Sophia's last message the next morning with a warm but carefully measured reply, hoping to slow the pace of emotions she no longer trusted herself to understand. Sophia noticed the change immediately, yet she never questioned it. Instead, She continued sending simple messages every few days, asking how the bookstore was doing or recommending another novel she thought Olivia might enjoy. Her patience made Olivia feel even more conflicted. She had expected disappointment or frustration. Instead, she received understanding. One Friday afternoon, Olivia arrived at their favorite café only to find the familiar chair by the window empty. The barista smiled as she prepared Olivia's usual vanilla latte. "Your friend stopped by earlier," she said. "She mentioned she might be traveling for a while." Olivia looked up in surprise. "Traveling?" The barista nodded. "A performing arts company invited her to join a series of shows in Portland for several weeks." She seemed excited, but she also looked like she was leaving something important behind. Olivia quietly thanked her before carrying her drink to the window. Outside, pedestrians hurried along rain-soaked sidewalks while yellow leaves drifted through the cool October air. The empty chair across from her suddenly felt much larger than it ever had before. Later that evening, her phone lit up with a message from Sophia. A photograph showed a suitcase resting beside a train platform beneath soft evening lights. Beneath it were only a few words. "I will be gone for a little while. Please keep reading beautiful stories until I come back." Olivia smiled through an unexpected ache in her chest. She wanted to reply immediately. She wanted to tell Sophia not to leave. Instead, she simply wished her a safe journey and promised the bookstore would still be there when she returned. Over the following weeks, Boston continued moving through late autumn exactly as it always had. Customers filled the bookstore. The farmers' market opened every Saturday. The Charles River reflected another series of quiet sunsets. Yet every familiar place seemed to be missing something invisible. Olivia still visited the café by the window, but the conversations were gone. She still walked beside the river, but the peaceful silence no longer felt complete. One afternoon, while shelving returned books, she absent-mindedly reached for a novel Sophia had recommended. As she opened the cover, a pressed white daisy slipped gently onto the wooden floor. Olivia remembered the flower Sophia had once received from the elderly florist at the farmer's market. Holding the delicate petals between her fingers, she finally stopped pretending. It was never the distance between their different worlds that frightened her. It was the realization that somewhere along the way, Sophia had quietly become the place where her heart felt most at home. Nearly a month passed before the first hint of winter settled over Boston. The maple trees that had once filled every street with brilliant shades of gold now stood quietly beneath pale gray skies, their branches reaching toward the cold morning light. Olivia continued opening the bookstore every day, arranging novels, greeting familiar customers, and smiling whenever children wandered into the reading corner. From the outside, everything appeared exactly the same. Only she knew how much had changed. Every evening, before locking the front door, she found herself glancing toward the sidewalk, half expecting to see Sophia walking toward the shop with the same gentle smile that had become impossible to forget. One Tuesday afternoon, while organizing a display of newly released novels, Olivia received a message that made her heart skip. It was from Sophia. A simple photograph showed an empty theater after the audience had gone home. Soft lights still illuminated the stage, while rows of quiet seats stretched into the distance. Beneath the picture, Sophia had written, "Tomorrow is my final performance. I will be back in Boston after that." Olivia read the message several times before slowly setting her phone down. Throughout the rest of the afternoon, she tried to focus on work, but every book she touched reminded her of conversations they had shared. Every customer seemed to disappear behind thoughts she could no longer ignore. By the time the bookstore closed, she had already made her decision. Before sunrise the next morning, Olivia packed a small overnight bag, filled a travel mug with hot coffee, and began the drive north. The highway stretched through quiet forests touched by the first frost of the season, while gentle morning light slowly painted the horizon in soft shades of gold and silver. The journey gave her more than enough time to think, yet for the first time she stopped questioning her feelings. She was no longer driving because she needed answers. She was driving because she already knew the truth. Late that afternoon, Olivia arrived outside the historic theater where Sophia's final performance would soon end. She waited beneath the old brick entrance as people gradually filled the sidewalks, their cheerful conversations drifting through the crisp air. When the theater doors finally opened, the audience slowly stepped outside, smiling as they discussed the evening they had just experienced. Then Olivia saw her. Sophia emerged beneath the glowing marquee wearing a simple wool coat over her performance clothes, her chestnut hair catching the cool evening breeze. She looked tired, yet peaceful. Their eyes met across the crowd. Surprise softened into unmistakable happiness. Without hesitation, Sophia walked toward her, while Olivia smiled with a quiet certainty she had never felt before. Some journeys begin with unexpected meetings, but the most important ones begin the moment fear finally decides to let hope take its place. The crowd gradually disappeared into the quiet evening, leaving only scattered footsteps echoing across the sidewalk outside the theater. Soft white lights shimmered above the entrance while the cold December air carried the faint scent of pine from holiday decorations lining the nearby streets. For a long moment, neither Olivia nor Sophia spoke. They simply stood facing one another, smiling in the peaceful silence that had always seemed to belong only to them. Sophia laughed softly, still trying to believe what she was seeing. "I thought I would have to wait until I returned to Boston." Olivia shook her head with a gentle smile. "I realized I had already waited long enough." They began walking together through the quiet streets surrounding the theater, passing small cafes glowing warmly behind frosted windows and families enjoying the first holiday lights of the season. The city felt calm, almost as though it had slowed down just for them. Sophia glanced toward Olivia with quiet curiosity. "What changed?" Olivia looked ahead for a moment before answering honestly. "I kept trying to convince myself that staying careful would protect me. Instead, it only made me miss the person who made every ordinary day brighter." Sophia listened without interrupting, just as she always had. Olivia smiled faintly before continuing. "When you left, I thought distance would help me understand my feelings. It did. I finally understood that I was not afraid of your world. I was afraid of how much I wanted to be part of it." They reached a quiet overlook where the lights of the river reflected like tiny stars across the water. Snowflakes began drifting gently through the night, settling softly on the wooden railing beside them. Olivia turned toward Sophia, her eyes bright with quiet emotion. "There is something I should have said a long time ago." Sophia waited patiently, offering nothing except her complete attention. Olivia took a slow breath before smiling through the nervousness she no longer wanted to hide. "I cannot wait to discover what love looks like when I stop being afraid of it. And if you are willing, I hope I can discover it with you." The words settled peacefully into the winter evening. Sophia's eyes softened with unmistakable warmth before she reached forward and gently held Olivia's hands between her own. "I have never wanted you to become someone different," she whispered. "I only hoped you would someday believe that the person you already are is enough." Olivia felt every lingering doubt quietly disappear. Snow continued falling around them while the river carried shimmering reflections through the silent night. In that simple moment, surrounded by nothing more than winter light, gentle silence, and two honest hearts, the future no longer felt uncertain. It finally felt like home. Spring arrived quietly, almost as though the city itself had decided to begin again alongside them. The snow that had once covered the sidewalks disappeared beneath fresh green leaves and flowering trees, filling Boston with gentle colors that reflected the same quiet hope growing inside Olivia and Sophia. Life did not suddenly become extraordinary after that winter evening. Instead, it became beautifully ordinary in all the ways that mattered most. Olivia still unlocked the bookstore every morning before the first customers arrived, carefully arranging novels in the front window while sunlight streamed across polished wooden floors. Sophia continued performing several evenings each week because she still loved music, movement, and the joy of making people smile. Yet when the stage lights faded each night, she always looked forward to the peaceful moments waiting beyond them. Sometimes she met Olivia for late coffee at their favorite café. Other evenings they walked beside the Charles River, talking about everything and nothing until the city lights shimmered across the water. One bright Saturday morning, they returned to the neighborhood farmers market where so many meaningful conversations had quietly begun. The familiar florist greeted them with a warm smile before handing Sophia another single white daisy. This time, without saying a word, Sophia gently placed the flower into Olivia's hands. Olivia smiled, remembering the pressed daisy that had once helped her recognize feelings she had tried so hard to hide. The simple gesture carried more meaning than any grand declaration ever could. They continued walking through the market together, greeting familiar vendors, sharing fresh pastries, and laughing over stories that had already become cherished memories. Later that afternoon, they found themselves sitting beneath the same maple tree where they had once spoken about dreams and first impressions. Olivia looked around at the peaceful neighborhood before quietly saying, "I used to believe that happiness had to be carefully planned. Now I think it grows from moments we never expected." Sophia smiled with the calm warmth Olivia had fallen in love with from the very beginning. "The best stories usually do," she replied softly. They remained there for a long while, watching children play, neighbors greet one another, and sunlight dance gently through the branches overhead. Nothing about the afternoon would have seemed remarkable to anyone passing by. Yet for Olivia, every ordinary detail had become extraordinary simply because she was sharing it with someone who had taught her that love never asks us to become someone else. It quietly reminds us that we were always enough. And as they stood together beneath the bright spring sky before walking home side by side, Olivia understood that the most meaningful journeys are never measured by how dramatically they begin, but by the quiet peace they leave in the heart long after the story finds its ending.